You're tuned in to Labora-Story, presented by Theater Lab. Labora-Story is a monthly radio play podcast featuring scripts by St. Louis writers, acted by St. Louis actors, and directed by artistic producing director Ryan Scott Foizey and associate director Jason Klefisch. With new stories to tune into on the 13th of every month, you're at the intersection of nostalgic radio plays and the future of podcasts. Labora-Story, theatrics for your ears.
Let me just set the scene for you. The year is 1984, and the mainstream music industry is plagued with pop. Rock and roll and the integrity of its prominent artists were suffering at that time. Then comes this little rock band that could, by the name of the Sock Puppets. The cautionary tale that follows their debut is known well by most fans of rock and roll. Millions in record sales, a fantastic following, drug abuse, tabloids, and in the end, a tragic loss. And then later, the most successful solo career in rock and roll history. I'm Rick Scott with WKUNT in St. Louis. This week on Rockcast, I sat down with famed solo artist and former frontman of the Sock Puppets, Derek Mayfield. Yes, you heard me correctly. 7-time Grammy Award winner, Rock and Roll Hall of Famer, tabloid tantalizer turned recluse rock star, Derek Mayfield. Before we get started, I just want to say that this week's episode really jarred all of us over here at the station. Usually, when the producers and I decide to do an interview piece with a certain band or artist, we first have to go through a barrage of agents, band managers, and even sometimes draft contracts with record labels. Never, in my 3 years of hosting this series, have I ever been directly contacted and requested for an interview by the artist. He gives his first interview in almost 10 years. This week on Rockcast.
You have one new voicemail from
Derek Mayfield. Yeah, Richard, listen, this is Derek Mayfield. Yeah, listen, Ricky, I got you on. I heard you on your show. Listen, I heard you. I heard you talking to Keith and Mick, and you're talking about Bowie, you're talking about music. Listen, I was listening to that show, and I mean, it got me really thinking. I mean, shit, it's been a long time, you know? No one's heard of me for years. My music's been going, but they haven't heard from me, you know? And I want you to sit down. When I sit down, and I want you to ask me some shit, some real pensive shit, you know? Because let me tell you something, Bubba, I've seen some shit, and I've been through some shit, you know? I don't know about all that, you know, but I just, I want you to sit down with me, and I want you and nobody else but you to do it. Okay, Ricky? Listen, it's best if I just if I contact you, if I get back with you, okay? Because I'm in the middle of something right now, and say, hold on, be right back. So I'll call you back in a bit with a little more info, and we can actually get together. No, listen.
I became overwhelmingly intrigued by that voicemail. So, just as a lark, I decided to reach out to a few well-known reps from Mayfield's old label to see what I was getting myself into. I wound up speaking with Molly Shepfield over at Capitol Records.
No, man, like, I get what you're saying, right? Like, it's Derek Mayfield. I get your cause for being jazzed. It was a big deal for me when I signed on with them.
Molly was Mayfield's manager for his last 3 years at Capitol Records.
It was one of the most challenging times in my career, and also the most rewarding.
At this point, my reaction to Mayfield reaching out had been nothing short of fanatic excitement. But it wasn't until I spoke with Molly that I started to realize what I was getting myself into by interviewing Mayfield.
Look, Derek is not like other rock stars. Most of these guys, they maintain a persona, but then they go home, nuke their dinner, like every other working man. Derek is that persona. persona he puts on stage. And by living his life like that, he makes for a mess of a man. And one hell of a musician.
What do you mean by that?
I mean, he has some demons to work out. And when traveling on tour with him, I would see some of those demons up close. A lot of shows being canceled, a lot of playing a game of, where's Derek? One time, I was picking him off the floor of some bar during a tour pass through Detroit.
72 hours later, Mayfield calls back.
Richard, you still want to do this thing or what, man? Come on.
Yes, we are still interested in the interview. How is your availability looking for for the 13th?
No, nothing. I don't do anything with the number 13 in it. We go tonight.
Tonight?
Yes, motherfucker, we do it tonight. We do it tonight, all right? Listen, get a pen, get a crayon, get prick your finger, get some blood. Write this down. Here's my address, all right?
I decided to include this odd exchange of phone calls between Mayfield and I for a couple reasons. The main one being that this behavior, well, that was just the tip of the iceberg. For this interview, I requested the aid of our sound engineer, Ernie Crycek. You're going to hear Ernie's voice a few times during the interview.
Mr. Mayfield, get you over here, right here in front of this mic. And
I should mention that, like me, Ernie is also a massive fan of Mayfield.
a little station set up for you here. Got
Perfect.
right there.
Is this testing? Test.
Yeah, no.
You testing?
That's good.
Oh,
no, it's good.
okay.
Never want to be too close to it. So.
Do you prefer Mr. Mayfield or what do you?
Just call me anything you want. The Mr. Mayfield. That sounds a bit much.
Yeah, no, I was thinking that too.
Just try.
Just felt weird.
Yeah, that's weird as well.
How about rock god? You gonna say that?
To paint a picture, it seems as though our rock god had made himself a sack lunch of sorts. To his right, he had this little station set up. And that station had a tin, and inside of it was his blow, every narcotic that you could think of. And of course, he had a rocks glass and a bottle of whiskey. Well, what was once a bottle of whiskey.
So have you guys eaten?
Did we?
No. Yeah, I ate. I had a ham and Swiss sandwich.
That's
on the way
right.
over here.
Yeah, you ate.
Oh,
I haven't
that's
eaten,
good.
but I'm not hungry, so.
Rick.
It's you guys are just in time for breakfast.
Oh.
Oh.
And I'm a gracious host, so guests first.
Oh, no. Yes, you heard that correctly. That was the Derek Mayfield offering Ernie and myself cocaine. We were compelled to decline for professional and legality reasons, but nevertheless, eat your heart out, Cameron Crowe.
Batter up.
Okay, so let's get started. Let's go back. Let's talk about Frankie.
Next question.
Yeah. Sorry. So you can probably tell at this point that I was getting a little nervous. And so I jumped right into asking about Frankie. For those of our listeners who don't know, Frankie was the drummer for the Sock Puppets. He was killed in a car accident during their 1987 tour.
A lot of people know my history. Now, that's not the proper way to start off this interview.
No, you're right. It's not, and I realize that now.
So,
I'm just
look through your book.
Mm-hmm.
Find a good one to start off with.
Mm-hmm.
We'll go with that one.
Yeah, let's backpedal.
Let's lead with that.
Okay. So as any big fan of the Sock Puppets or Derek Mayfield knows, your music spans a wide array of different genres and styles. You've got your ballads, like Mississippi Breeze, I know is one of the, most popular ballads that you ever wrote. And Man Apart is another one. But then you also get a little heavier in the rock and roll, like with Undercover and The Metal and the Blood. I know Undercover obviously has to have some sort of connection. Is that your golden egg? I mean, you covered it in your solo career. I think it's the only Sock Puppet song that you still perform.
That is the only one that carried over from our big smashing debut. They had us so high at one point, it was unbelievable. But the Undercover from that album was a track by itself. It's something I had been working on for a long, long time, and I thought, if I do this and that, and there's several recordings out there that I've done, but the one that I carried over wound up being on people love that song, and there's a connection there that I had that I never. Hold on. I'm losing, guys. I'm losing it.
He just kept saying, I'm losing it. And it took me a second to really understand what was happening. Then it dawned on me. He was losing it. It was personal.
Let me tell you something about that song. That, even to this day, it gets me.
I know that you co-wrote that song with...
Look, I know what I did. I know. I was there. I wrote the goddamn song. You don't have to tell me what I did and what that song means. It means something to me that, like I said, it's my connection to Frankie, that, and my love for him, that with him gone, I had to do something, and we did. I didn't want to release it just as a single and tribute, or I wanted to give it what it deserved. You know, it was my stairway. You know, it was an ode to him, and it wound up. Everyone knows the bus story, but they don't know that I was driving the bus. Apparently, someone thought it was a good idea to get the tour bus driver fucked up beyond the point to where the guy couldn't even remember his name, let alone drive a bus with the band on it and everything else. So I got the shortest straw. I was the only one with a license, so that was me. I drove. I shouldn't have drove. No one should have drove. We should have fucking just called it a night and waited till morning. None of us should have survived that crash. None of us. It's a miracle that any of us did. But losing Frankie, it was nothing I could do. I was just close to joining Frankie in that great gig in the sky, you know? That's when it started, you know?
I wanted to talk to Ernie about all this, about what he thought of Mayfield after the interview. Because while I was feeling a little jaded, Ernie was walking away inspired.
You have to agree. I mean, it's a bit sad. Isn't it?
No, I don't have to agree. I don't think it's sad. I think it's badass that he's like still doing it. He's still fucking the same Mayfield that I fell in love with when I was 18 years old. And has posters all over my room.
But isn't that the problem? That's kind of the problem. He's the same Mayfield, right? I mean, I don't know. For me, like, I grew up and Mayfield helped me do that. I expected him to kind of grow with me, you know?
Okay.
He's still getting blown out of his mind.
Tough shit. Don't meet your heroes.
No, okay.
I mean, no.
Let me give you. Hang on.
Doing
Let me give you an example. Okay, take Robert Plant for instance. Okay. He went from like screaming when the levee breaks and the Immigrant Song, right, to now. But no, listen. Now he's singing with the Band of Joy, and everything's like super bohemian, and he brought it down a level.
All right, now I'm understanding why you're jaded. Okay, so
his music matured.
No, so you think that like Mayfield owes it to you as a fan or to fans in general that he needs to like reach some staple moment of the third act of his career as a rock artist Because that's what every fucking other rock artist does?
That's
like,
not,
that.
no,
That's
listen,
that's
I'm not
how it works.
I'm not saying he has to do anything because
That's not
Bowie
how it
did
works.
it.
He
Because
doesn't
Plant
owe anything to the fans. This is an industry that's built on rebellion. And Mayfield, he's still rebelling by being in his 50s and still actually living the persona that he was when we were 18 years old.
I'm not saying that he owes me anything, all right? That's not what I'm getting at. I don't know. Can we just agree that maybe it's a bit more personal for me?
That I hadn't considered.
Before we close out, I want to leave you with a specific segment from my interview with Mayfield. I had asked him to touch on a couple of his favorite moments out on the road, and he left us with this.
It was a night, I forget I don't even remember exactly where it was, but there was an outdoor event, and we were to go on last, of course, and we went on, and not 5 minutes into the show, just a cut, not a power outage, it was a cut, just and nothing, and we just in the middle of everything. They imagined over, I forget the number, but it wound up being 3 times as many people there. So they're fans on top of fans on top of fans for this thing. So somehow it just couldn't handle it. There was too much. So the power cut, it happens. And all these fans, they're still screaming. It's not like they got cut. You don't cut the fans. The fans just keep on going. And now we just think it's going to be a temporary temporary timeout. Okay, we'll just get the technical difficulties. Please stand by, And then before you know it, I get the word that it's not. They're not going to be able to get everything back together. So I get these guys together who they're shitting their pants too. They don't know what to do. They think it's end, but we get everything together. We position. I get these guys to position everything on the stage to form this type of thing to where we can perform an acoustic type of thing for these thousands of people. I couldn't tell you how many people. There was just seas of people. So we had to do something to put on a show for these people. We didn't want to disappoint these. What are you gonna do? Turn these fans away? No. So we played, and somehow the fans sang with the fans. They knew our shit too, and they played and they sang along with us. It almost sounded like we were plugged in for the set that we had, and it was like a magical night that could have been duplicated. I think of that night. I can't even remember where the hell it was. I remember everything of that night, but I can't remember where it was. But we played. God, we just played and played. We played everything. We played everything of ours. We played old standards, the old covers. We did everything, and the fans loved it. We played. God, it must have been 3 hours. It was the biggest unplugged event I think in history, and no one went home sad. They all loved the show, man. And I think of that show because nothing stops rock and roll. Sorry, your sound man's getting mad at me. That's all right, Bernie. But no, nothing. You don't stop rock and roll. No power cut is gonna stop rock and roll. No flying close to the sun I could be flying close to the sun, but there's gonna be, and I might get burned out, but there's gonna be 1,200 other guys behind me flying in the same direction, following my trail, and they'll be heading to that sun too, flying too close to it. They're fucking heading dead center to it. Sometimes that's the course you're on. Like I said, you don't call up anybody and make specific reservations. Reservations kind of get made for you. Your name's on that ticket, and you fly, baby. You fly.
And I guess maybe that's ultimately what I took away from my conversation with Ernie. That maybe it's just not the entertainer's job to be your friend. Because at the end of the day, he gave me his music. And like I said, he helped me grow. And maybe that's all he needs to be. He's Derek fucking Mayfield. Next time on Rockcast, we sit down with up-and-coming R&B soul blues singer Alan Stone, and we discuss the re-release of his latest album, Radius. That was Inside the Sock Puppet, an exclusive interview with Derek Mayfield. That script was written and directed by Jason Klefisch and myself. Again, we want to give a special shout out and thanks to sound engineer William Locke. The cast of this podcast within our podcast featured Todd Micali as the Derek Mayfield, Jason Klefisch as Ernie Crycek, and myself as the Rockcast host. Motherfuck, god damn that fucking door. Jason Klefisch as Ernie Crycek, and myself, Ryan Scott Foizey, as the Rockcast host, Rick Scott. And also a shout out to Marcy Wiegert for playing Molly Shepfield. We'd like to give a special thanks to quite a few different people and organizations. First, Leaping Lizards for lending their space for recording. They have an event coming up here pretty soon. It's May 20th and 21st at 7 p.m. at CBC High School. And you can call them at 314-645-6463 for ticket information. It promises to be a pretty cool show. It's called Everyday Heroes. We'd also like to thank Sammy Seligson for lending her space for recording as well. Again, thanks to William Locke and Jason Klefisch. There were a lot of different things that were tossed around, and we were made to adapt at a moment's notice. And so I'd like to thank the crew here at Labora-Story for making sure that we could do that. Labora-Story will return on May 13th with an adaptation of Jason Klefisch's first script that he contributed to Theater Lab with the Winter 24-Hour Play Festival. It's called Cringe. You can check us out on Podbean, YouTube, iTunes, Facebook, and Twitter, so be sure to check in and see what we're up to next. Until next time.
You've been listening to Labora-Story, presented by Theater Lab, theatrics for your ears. We'll have more for you on the 13th of every month. In the meantime, keep up with Theater Lab at facebook.com/TheaterLabSTL or visit www.theaterlabstl.com for more Labora Stories. Until next time.